Outside, it was pouring rain. On the streets, colorful umbrellas could be seen everywhere. Huatan was also out on the street. However, he had nothing to cover himself and was just running in the rain. Looking up, he saw the rain getting heavier. Nevertheless, he had no intention of finding shelter, because he only needed to cross the street opposite to reach his house. He ran nonstop. His shoes were soaked with rainwater, dripping with each step. Finally, he reached a dry place. Only then did he leisurely climb the stairs. He looked out the window. The rain showed no signs of stopping. Then he continued going up. Outside, the rain was getting heavier by the minute. Arriving, Huatan turned on the switch, and the pitch-dark hallway lit up. Suddenly, a strange sight caught his eye. A girl in ancient costume was holding a sword, looking at him cautiously. She was also soaking wet. Huatan surprisingly observed her, his face showing little goodwill. He stared at her for a long time. He absolutely didn't know this person. Sensing the killing intent, he startled and asked who she was. He stepped back a few stairs. Only then did he clearly see the girl's outfit. She frowned at him with an annoyed expression. But on the contrary, Huatan had relaxed a lot more, surprising even himself. So it was cosplay. Thinking this, he stepped up again. His eyes unconsciously glanced at her. He suddenly widened his eyes, as if discovering something. This pose, looking at this sword, these straw sandals. He exclaimed in admiration and turned to leave. Very professional. Unexpectedly, the girl shouted for him to stop. Huatan replied in confusion that this was his home. He thought to himself, do I look like a bad person, scaring someone from so far away? The girl's name was Kwang Hoa. Now she was even more cautious, her hand on the sword hilt. He was speechless, seriously. She stepped back, saying it was too disrespectful. After that, he decided to ignore her and opened the door to enter. What a strange person. After entering the house, Huatan still couldn't resist looking to see what Kwang Hoa was doing. He only saw her still maintaining that pose, standing in the corner of the wall, not moving. He went back to the bathroom to wash up and change clothes. Water was still dripping from his body onto the floor. He opened the cabinet and took out a can of soda. Then he took the food bag from the fridge and called Bai Dao, come here. He held the cat food bag, waiting for the pet to appear. Not long after, it poked its head out with bright eyes. He opened the soda can. Then, he drank almost all of it in one go. After drinking, a satisfied expression appeared on his face. Taking a shower and drinking a Coca-Cola is so refreshing. After saying that, he put on slippers and went out to watch the cat eating. He sat down on the chair, looking out the window. Outside, the rain still wouldn't stop. Seeing this, he sighed. The dark clouds kept coming one after another, not clearing up at all. Huatan suddenly seemed to think of something. He took an umbrella and looked out into the hallway through the peephole. There was no one outside anymore. He still continued to look again. Finally, he opened the door to go out and see if she had left. At that moment, Kwang Hoa suddenly appeared like a ghost. She still maintained the same expression, full of killing intent, looking at him. In an instant, he was speechless, not knowing what to say. Huatan awkwardly pointed at the umbrella and said, "Look at this, it's getting dark. The rain probably won't stop soon. If your house isn't far." He continued, "If it's far, you can call your family to pick you up. I can help you find security. Looking like this, you should go home soon." She didn't care and asked about something else. "Where is this?" He replied, "This is my home, in the residential area on Bakvong Street." Hearing this, Kwang Hoa frowned in thought. Then she asked again who he was. Huatan was at a loss for words. How should he answer? A kind neighbor or a lunatic? He reluctantly said, "Just call me Huatan." After saying that, he offered the umbrella to her, asking if she needed it. If not, he'd put it away. She remained silent, looking very cautious. After a while, she finally said, "I am originally a disciple of the Yin clan. I don't know why I've come to this place." After speaking, she even clasped her hands and bowed. He thought to himself, she's really sick. I didn't expect her to be a young girl obsessed with cosplay. He sighed and said, "All right, fine." Turning to go inside, he said, "Maybe I should call security to check this out." He didn't forget to tell her, "Come inside. It's cold out here." After Kwang Hoa entered the house, Huatan also dialed the number to call security. He said, "Uncle Zhao, is that you? Can you hear me? It's little Hua." Behind him, Kwang Hoa stared wide-eyed at the TV screen. On the screen, a group of people simultaneously raised their hands and shouted, "Where to find a job." A loud noise startled Huatan, making him turn his head. His eyes caught the sight of Kwang Hoa thrusting her sword straight into the TV screen. The TV was completely shattered. Not only that, she looked very angry. He stood rooted to the spot, hearing the security guard on the other end of the line repeatedly asking, "Little Hua, I heard a loud noise. What's going on? Hua Tan remained stunned. He truly couldn't understand what kind of thing he had just brought home. At this moment, Kwang Hoa turned to look at him. Her eyes were bloodshot. He awkwardly said into the phone, "It's nothing, uncle. Please continue with your work." Hua Tan stared blankly at Kwang Hoa as she smashed his TV. He was furious to the point of madness. This scene was no different from a bloody movie set. However, he still tried to stay calm, smiling as he asked her, "Where did you say you came from?" She attentively used her sword to poke at the people who had just disappeared, checking if they would come out, then turned to ask him, "Also, who were you just talking to?" Hua Tan assessed her from top to bottom once again. He thought to himself, could she be from the Wu Chiao circus coming here? But they don't dress like this either. Casually smashing someone else's TV and wearing straw sandals, I wonder if she can even afford to compensate. Thinking this, he raised both hands in surrender. "How about you put away your sword first? I'm a good person. I even offered you an umbrella earlier." Hearing this, Kwang Hoa gripped the sword hilt tightly, then pulled it straight out of the TV screen. He forced a smile and asked, "What's your name? Where are you from?" She sheathed her sword, then introduced herself, Kwang Hoa, disciple of the Yin clan. He exclaimed, "The name Yin clan sounds nice. Is this Yin clan very big?" "Where is it?" she asked in surprise. "The Yin clan of Suzhou. Have you never heard of it?" He replied, "Never heard of it." He needed to say this. He was a bit hesitant. Looking at her body, rainwater was soaking wet, dripping from head to toe. He forced a smile. "Anyway, I'm a good person. I can help you. If you have any problems, just ask me." She said solemnly, "I want to go home, back to the Yin clan." He helplessly tried to explain. "This is the residential area on Back Vong Street, Vinkang New District, Zhongtan City." Zhou Nao Zhangtang. Seeing her shake her head, he could only put his hand to his forehead. Could she be from ancient times? "Don't joke around. Do I have to ask who the emperor is?" Unexpectedly, she reacted, glaring as she said, "His Majesty." He had to continue asking, "So who is His Majesty?" To his surprise, she replied, "His Majesty is His Majesty." He then asked, "May I ask what year it is now?" She looked at him blankly. "Isn't it the 16th year of Kai Yuan?" Hua Tan said in horror, "Girl, it's not." This girl's nerves don't seem to be joking. Thinking of this, he gestured to her. "Wait a moment." Then, he opened his phone to search for information online. He scratched his head and asked, "Emperor Xuanzou." "That's right, it's him." He read another name, Li Longji. Then he looked at her and asked, "So Li Bai, Li Tai Bai, the Blue Lotus resident, do you know them?" Hearing this, Kwang Hoa finally smiled. "Do you know him? Where is he?" He was speechless, remembering the character in the game. Perhaps he's in a mountain valley fighting monsters. Just then, the food delivery person knocked on the door. "Your order has been delivered." Before Kwang Hoa could react, she was about to swing her sword. "Who's that? Whose voice is that?" Hua Tan panicked and shouted, "Wait." He quickly explained, "It's someone delivering food for me. Not a bad person. Calm down. Step back. Don't let them see you." She frowned and asked, "Is it a servant?" He replied, "No, it's a food delivery person." The delivery person said, "Hello, sir. Here's your food." He thanked them and went inside. Kwang Hoa said again, "Are we fighting?" He immediately stopped her, placing the food in front of her. "Are you hungry? Let's eat together." She hesitated. "No need, thank you." She kept staring at him as if looking at a strange creature. She asked, "Why do you all have short hair? Is this place a penal colony?" Hua Tan explained, "No, wait. What do you mean by you all?" Kwang Hoa recounted, "I arrived here 1 watch ago. I saw outside." He gaped, thinking, 1 watch ago is 2 hours ago, right? It had just started raining then. A person with a sword was already out there, not attacking. Perhaps the situation was very tense then. Luckily, nothing happened. Hua Tan brought a piece of bread to his mouth and asked, "Did no one notice you?" She replied, "No. I just walked around hiding in the shadows." Hearing this, he was satisfied and was about to bite into the bread. "That's good then." Just as he took a bite, Kwang Hoa leaned in and asked, "You still haven't answered my question." He paused and said, "How should I put this? Just consider it a local custom. There's no special reason." Then he brought the bread to her mouth and asked, "Want to try? I'm sure you've never eaten this before." Looking at the sandwich filled with ingredients, her taste buds were clearly stimulated. She unconsciously leaned in to smell it, but still firmly shook her head. Seeing this, Hua Tan asked, "You don't want it?" Then he handed her a cup of water. "Then drink something to quench your thirst. I've opened the bottle. This cup is for you. It's very sweet. I guess you've never had it before." Hearing this, Kwang Hoa suddenly became angry and was about to attack. "Are you looking down on me? It's been like this from the start. You clearly said it was rice, so what are you eating?" He helplessly explained, I'm not looking down on you. Anything that fills your stomach is considered a meal. This is called a hamburger. Accidentally touching the Coca-Cola can on the table, it fell to the ground. Huatan looked at it speechlessly. They looked at each other, neither saying anything for a long time. A moment later, to be safe, he explained first, it's really not poison. This is called carbonated soft drink. But it was too late. Kwang Hoa angrily drew her sword to stab him. He tried to explain, it's really just a misunderstanding. Kwang Hoa glared at him angrily. Seeing this, he immediately picked up the Coca-Cola can, then drank it all in one go. He glanced at her, trying to prove himself. At this moment, she firmly shook her head again. Huatan smiled. Can you stop drawing your sword at the slightest thing? I'm a good person. If not, I would have locked you out long ago. Who would care if you lived or died, right? Kwang Hoa stared at him blankly. He pointed at the cat. It's scared to death. He looked over and noticed she was still gripping her sword tightly. He thought to himself, dealing with such a violent girl, there were only 3 options at the moment. One was to trick her outside and lock her out, let her be hungry or cold, whatever. Let her slash or kill as she pleased. It wouldn't concern him anyway. At most, in 3 days he'd see news of her being arrested or shot in the papers. 2 was to directly call the police to handle this. It could be that a descendant of Emperor Xuanzong had run into modern society. Why use this image, though? He wasn't a pervert. From over 1,200 years ago until now. Anyway, it had research value. But the police would certainly think he was joking. If something went wrong then, he imagined people asking her, Miss, do you know him? Where do you live? We'll take you home. Again, it would be a bloody scene. Huatan imagined it himself and became scared, covering his face with his hands. A moment later, he dared to peek. The third option was to let her stay here and see how things go. An ancient female warrior was right in front of him, holding a sword, standing in front of him in his own house. Could he just let her go? Although she was a bit violent, drawing her sword at the slightest provocation. But who knows, this ancient person might even have Qinggong skills, not to mention other abilities. If he tricked this ancient person from over 1,200 years ago to go outside, then whether she gets caught or has to wander around later, or if by luck she survives in this society, even if someone takes her in, if that really happens, he would regret it deeply. The scene from a science fiction novel was right before his eyes. Could he let her escape? Thinking about this, he suddenly felt a surge of excitement. He offered her the sandwich again. Eat a little. She looked very tempted, but still firmly turned away. She had backed away, but her eyes were still fixed on it. She asked, what is this? Huatan took a sip of water before answering her food. Or should I eat a piece first to prove it's not poisoned? Hearing this, Kwang Hoa's eyes lit up and she replied, all right. So he calmly took a bite. But then he thought if she's not used to it or doesn't like it, she might get upset and stab him to death. Thinking of this, he gave up. Perhaps you're not used to it. Wait a moment, I'll order some rice for you. But Kwang Hoa kept looking longingly at the sandwich as it gradually disappeared. Now she was truly unhappy. He patted the empty space beside him. Do you know where this is? Sit down and let's talk. You're holding that sword, and I'm very scared. Hearing this, she slowly approached. She was very cautious, careful with each step. Huatan thought to himself, he really wanted to take out his phone and capture this rare scene. As soon as she sat down, he suddenly smiled, looking a bit mischievous. She thought to herself, although everything was very unfamiliar, she knew what this umbrella was. This man in front of her indeed wanted to give her the umbrella from the beginning. It's just that this room was a bit strange, and so was the food he was eating. The person in front of her might be a bit weird. It's better to be careful. She asked again, where is this? He patiently answered, Jiangqing City. I don't know how to explain it to you. Do you know Li Bai? Hearing this, Kwang Hoa immediately asked, do you know where he is? He pretended to nod, then said, what I'm about to say, please don't be afraid. Put down your sword. I'm afraid you might get agitated. Hearing this, she placed the sword on her lap. She said dejectedly, it doesn't matter where. I just want to go home. Hearing this, Huatan suddenly looked at her for a moment. He said honestly, you can't go back anymore, because this place is very far from your home. She immediately asked, how far? He hesitated for a moment before saying, over 1,200 years. Unexpectedly, she asked in confusion, what do you mean? Huatan began using his fingers to gesture on the table for her to see. This place is 1,200 years later. Your era still had Emperor Xuanzong, Li Bai, and also Yang Guifei and Lu Shan. Whether you know them or not, your emperor, your friends, the people you know are all characters from over 1,000 years ago. They've been dead for 1,000 years. She was shocked after hearing this. She immediately stood up and said, nonsense. He explained, whether it's nonsense or not, you can investigate slowly. Anyway, you've already seen it now. Nothing is familiar to you. Now you can consider this place as a completely new world. The Jade Palace in the high heavens, 12 magnificent and majestic halls. You know Li Bai's poem, right? Just consider it as being in the Jade Palace in heaven. She firmly objected. He never wrote this poem. He coughed a few times to hide his embarrassment. Just a small mistake. Maybe when you knew him, he hadn't written it yet. Perhaps he was only in his 20s then. You can investigate about Li Bai slowly. In short, this world is both dangerous and safe. It has its own laws. To be safe, you need to understand this world first. She still didn't accept it, saying, "You're deceiving me." Hua Tan said, "You're a smart person. I think you should have your own judgment. Haven't you seen outside already? The current world and the world you're familiar with are completely different. For example, the people you know have all become history now." He thought to himself, if he were thrown 1,000 years into the future, he probably wouldn't be any better than this girl. She's not violent, she's just scared. Kwang Hoa angrily decided to leave. Boastful, "I don't believe you." Hua Tan quickly stopped her wait, so she pointed her sword at his face again. He helplessly said, "I've already told you. This world has laws. You need to learn a bit to be safe. For example, you can't carry weapons around freely. If you go out like this, it will be very dangerous." Suddenly Kwang Hoa asked, "Why are you helping me?" He looked at the cat. At first, Bai Dao was also outside. I brought him in to raise him. She asked, "Bai Dao?" Hua Tan smiled, picked it up, and said, "It's this fat cat." Kwang Hoa's face darkened again, about to draw her sword. "Are you looking down on me?" Both the person and the cat were startled. He quickly denied, "No, not at all." She stood up solemnly to observe Hua Tan. Meanwhile, he kept asking Bai Dao, "Why is your fur falling out so much?" Kwang Hoa thought to herself, although she didn't know if what he said was true or how many lies were in it. But from the first look, she could tell this man had no ill intentions. He was just returning home as usual, and then encountered her. It was about to get dark outside, so he just lent her an umbrella. She asked again, "Why are you helping me?" Hua Tan replied, "To be honest, I'm a bit curious. After all, this is too miraculous. Perhaps you understand too. If I went to your era and met a man from 1,000 years in the future, wouldn't you find it miraculous too?" Kwang Hoa replied, "If such a strange person appeared, they would only be killed by the Dali Sea." Hearing this, he was completely hopeless. But he still patiently said, "Different eras. Here, we can't kill people at will. Everyone loves peace. I don't know why you were able to come here. If we find out the reason, maybe you can go back. But before that, you have to learn how to live in this world. First, you can't harm others at will. Also, you can't damage things at will." Hearing this, she suddenly felt her self-esteem was hurt. Hua Tan continued, "If you can do that, I can help you. Or you can leave now. That's right, it's best not to harm others outside. Now there are officials everywhere. Moreover, they are very powerful." She pondered for a moment. "I don't know anything about this place. The clothes and way of dressing are different from everyone else. Perhaps I can't even leave the city. If I leave here, I really don't know where to go." He said again, "If you agree, then put down your sword. I'll order food for you. Have someone bring food here. Actually, keeping you here is also very risky. Moreover, it's a two-way risk. Not only do I have to prevent others from discovering you, but I'm also worried that if there's any misunderstanding, you'll draw your sword and slash me. So, do you understand?" Kwang Hoa just looked at him without saying anything, but then she really threw her sword aside. He asked her what she usually eats, saying the food here might not be familiar to her. "Let me see if there's anything you're familiar with." Then, he thought of fried dough sticks, but then rejected the idea, deciding to order her a portion of porridge with steamed buns instead. "You're all wet. You can take a bath first, then eat later." Then, he asked her if she had any internal energy that could dry her clothes. She blankly asked where to bathe. Hearing this, he led her to the bathroom. She looked at him in surprise as he opened the door. Hua Tan said this world has many miraculous things. You don't need to be surprised, and don't always think someone wants to harm you. At least I won't harm you. You can rest assured. Then, he went to the shower and instructed her how to use it. Look, left is hot water, right is cold water, press down to stop, lift up for water. Try it. So she really went into practice, while he started taking out his phone to record this strange but true event. He continued to guide, "This is shampoo, press here, and it will come out, then apply it to your head, and it will foam. Usually when it foams, it's clean. This is the toilet used for going to the bathroom." After giving instructions, Hua Tan went to the living room and sat down. He suddenly remembered he needed to get some clothes for her to wear. He carefully selected each outfit. This one won't do. That one's not right either. He spent a long time choosing. A moment later, he opened the bathroom door and went in. She startled and looked over. Hua Tan thought to himself, "Oh no, I forgot she doesn't know how to lock the door." He took out an outfit and said, "I don't have any women's clothes at home. You can wear this for now. I'll go out tomorrow and buy you a few sets. Then, he called her over again. Let me teach you how to lock the door. A moment later, the door was locked. Hua Tan went out, but felt very flustered inside. Luckily, she hadn't taken everything off. Otherwise, it would have surely been a bloody scene. He leaned back in his chair and sighed with relief. In the bathroom, Kwang Ho was happily playing with soap bubbles. Not only that, she even tried tasting a bit, then grimaced and coughed dryly. Outside, Hua Tan was thinking, picking up an ancient person, moreover a female warrior. Is this really not a dream? He picked up her sword to examine it. The blade was so shiny you could see your reflection in it. He thought to himself that he should take it to show his father when he had the chance, to see if it was a real antique. A while later, Kwang Hoa opened the door and came out. She saw Hua Tan writing something at the table, so she sat down beside him and asked, "What are you writing?" Then she leaned over to look. He awkwardly held up the paper. "This is just organizing some issues that need to be addressed right now. Can you recognize the characters?" Kwang Hoa took the paper and read it carefully. "It's a bit strange, very hard to distinguish." He replied, "I'll explain it to you after I finish writing." She picked up the clothes and said, "These clothes are also very strange." Hua Tan said awkwardly, "They're quite nice though. This is the custom in our place. Complimenting others is very normal. It's not a joke or anything." She frowned. "It's best not to say such frivolous things." He sighed. "All right." Suddenly he noticed her straw shoes and said, "There are slippers over there. Take a pair. Throw away these straw shoes. I'll buy you a new pair tomorrow." Hearing this, she looked down at her shoes. Seeing her go to change into slippers, Hua Tan thought to himself, how adorable. Suddenly, there was a sound at the door. "The food is here." She shrank back in fear. He waved his hand. "They're just food delivery people. No need to be tense." He thought to himself, this girl is so vigilant, just like a stray cat with no home. The delivery person said, "Enjoy your meal." Then he took the food bag and went inside. She sat down at the dining table where he had already set out the food containers, saying, "I remember now, my nanny used to say, people who treat you too enthusiastically can only be thieves." Hearing this, Hua Tan immediately looked at her in fear. Unexpectedly, she smiled. Kwang Hoa rarely smiled, but now she showed a very beautiful smile. "But you are a good person." Hua Tan sat next to Kwang Hoa, watching her eat bit by bit. After she finished eating, he spoke up, "Are you full? Now let's talk a bit. In short, you are currently a person from 1200 years ago." Kwang Hoa remained silent. He continued, "Whether you can accept it or not, our next conversation will be built on this basis. Understand? First, this place is absolutely safe, at least within this room. Even if you use your sword to kill me, as long as my corpse doesn't start to smell, you can hide here without starving to death. But you can only hide for about a week, meaning nothing will happen within 7 days. So there's no need to keep staring at that sword, because you don't know anything about the things here." He tapped on the broken TV and asked, "For example, this thing is just a tool that produces sound, used for." He hesitated for a moment, then continued, "Anyway, it's just a harmless entertainment tool." Hua Tan then took out his mobile phone from his pocket, pointed to it, and said, "There are many entertainment tools here. I'm telling you all this just to let you know that this place is absolutely safe. Any actions or things I do that you don't understand are very normal. I won't harm you. Do you understand?" Kwang Hoa remained silent, her hands tightly clasped on her lap. Hu Teng Sai Hao Pui then continued, "Next is the situation outside. This is a bit complicated to explain. Now it's a peaceful world. Everyone lives and works in peace, and it's very safe outside. But while it's safe for me, for you, everywhere is dangerous." Hearing this, Kwang Hoa blurted out, "Why?" Hua Tan replied, "Because if you suddenly appear outside, you might hurt others. It's like in the Imperial Palace. If you walk around with a knife, you'll certainly be arrested. That's roughly the idea. Just a glance, and people will know you're an outsider." He opened a drawer, searching for something. After a while, he took out a card and said, "This is an ID card. Everyone here has one, all with birth dates. If someone commits a crime or does something bad, they can issue a warrant based on this. So there are many officials on the streets, checking at any time to see if someone is a criminal or not. People without this, when they meet the police, if they look suspicious, will be taken for thorough investigation. At that time, everything about you will be exposed, and what happens then, I don't know, but it probably won't be good. There's one more thing. The laws here are very strict, and the officials are very capable. If you hurt someone, you'll definitely be caught, and then you'll go to jail. Those who resist will certainly die. Someone like you carrying a weapon on the street is also considered illegal, and if you attract attention, it's over. Saying this, he also thought to himself, that's why identity is the biggest issue. Now, the most important thing is to hide her well, then solve other problems gradually. If others notice and her identity is exposed, it will surely shock the whole world. An ancient female warrior still alive. Kwang Hoa seemed to understand. I see. You mean I'm a vagrant. He rubbed his chin and said, roughly, but it's more serious than being a vagrant. To be precise, it's like being a slave without a contract. If caught, it would be very miserable. It's just that being an exception has even more serious consequences. In this world, your situation is very dangerous. I'm very happy to meet someone from ancient times, 1,200 years ago, and I find it very magical, so I'm willing to help you get familiar with this world and gradually adapt. Kwang Hoa lowered her head slightly. Why should I trust you? I just want to go home. Unexpectedly, Hua Tan replied, if you don't trust me, we can say goodbye here. Helping you is not an easy task. In the current situation, if you fly around once, you'll become famous on the internet, impossible to hide. So you must cooperate. If you don't trust me, I have no way to help you. Both were silent for a moment. After a long time, she finally spoke. So what should I do? Hua Tan picked up the sword and said, first, from now on, don't draw your sword at the slightest provocation. For people of this world, that's a very frightening thing. Alright, now if you have any more questions, feel free to ask. I'll answer them for you. Kwang Hoa thought for a moment, finally asking a difficult question. Where is your wife? Hua Tan was also stumped, thinking to himself that this was indeed a woman's habit. Kwang Hoa cautiously asked further, is my presence here inconvenient? Hua Tan felt a bit uncomfortable. This poor guy has been single for over 2 years and is still unmarried. She looked up, not married. The atmosphere became silent again. Hua Tan covered his face and sighed. Do you think in our place, unmarried men and women living in the same room is a big deal? It's very normal, and it's not like I want you to sleep with me. I happen to have a spare room. He turned around and said, follow me, and a pile of stuff spilled out. He quickly tidied up, thinking to himself that just a moment ago they were exchanging pleasantries, and now he was cleaning a room for her. Kwang Hoa slung her sword over her back, thinking to herself, the customs here are so strange. Such an old landlord and still unmarried. Hua Tan said, right now I can only find the blanket I use in winter. You can use it for now. We'll talk more tomorrow. Don't worry. All these things have been washed clean. You want to make the bed. You should rest early. I know your mind must be in turmoil right now, because mine is too. I hope when we wake up tomorrow, we'll both find out this was just a dream. After finishing these tasks, he went out. Just as he left, he remembered something and turned back to say, oh right, my name is Hua Tan. He closed the door, not forgetting to wish her good night. Looking at the closed door, Kwang Hoa went to check everything, confirming it was safe before going to sit on the bed. Night fell over the old apartment complex. Hua Tan looked at the moon through the small window, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. He rolled over. It really doesn't feel real at all. During the day, he went out for a job interview, forgot to bring an umbrella, so he got wet running home. It was just a normal, unlucky day. He lay on his back again, putting his hand on his forehead, and ended up picking up a girl who draws her sword at the slightest provocation, claiming to be from ancient times. Hua Tan covered his face and sighed. Forget it. Why think so much? Just sleep first and figure it out tomorrow. And so a long night passed in silence. The next morning, sunlight shone through the window on Hua Tan's face, and he slowly woke up. He lazily reached for his phone on the bedside table. After checking the time, he mumbled, it's only 10 a.m. But he suddenly realized something was off. Right, yesterday. Thinking of this, he immediately sat up. Before leaving the room, he carefully peeked out, repeatedly swallowing. He saw Kwang Hoa sitting silently on the sofa, drawing her sword. Seeing him poke his head out, she called, Hua Tan. Hua Tan pretended nothing had happened, stepped out, scratched his head, and replied, it wasn't a dream after all. He coughed twice, walked over and greeted, up early, aren't you? Kwang Hoa coldly replied, it's almost noon. Hua Tan froze on the spot, then said, this won't do. He immediately changed the subject. All right, are you hungry? Kwang Hoa cautiously cracked her knuckles and answered a little. But contrary to Kwang Hoa's cold expression, her stomach kept growling. This scene was quite embarrassing. Kwang Hoa quickly ran to her room. Hua Tan called after her, wait a minute. She immediately came out and handed him a piece of silver. She spoke, although you don't lack these things. Hua Tan shamelessly interrupted her. Do you have gold? He thought to himself. Stealing silver isn't worth much, but gold will always have value sooner or later. We still don't know how to make an ID card. Maybe we'll need to use connections. I don't have much assets myself. What if this female warrior has some? Hearing this, Kwang Hoa took off the necklace from her neck, saying, "This might be worth a few taels of silver." Hua Tan quickly stopped her. Stop. Forget it. I was just asking casually. How could I take your money for food? He returned the silver piece to Kwang Hoa. Keep it. Kwang Hoa looked at him with some confusion. Looking at her disheveled appearance, Hua Tan said, "Later when we go out, I'll buy you some clothes or something, and we'll buy food to bring back too. Remember not to run around outside on your own. It's very dangerous out there." After saying this, Hua Tan went into the bathroom to wash his face. He thought, letting her wear my clothes, though more normal,